Do you know who is known as the founding father of Singapore?
Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew. Lee Kuan Yew was the first Prime Minister of Singapore who lived from 16 September 1923 to 23 March 2015. Born Harry Lee Kuan Yew, often referred to by his initials LKY, and in his earlier years as Harry Lee, was a Singaporean statesman and lawyer who served as the first Prime Minister of Singapore between 1959 and 1990. He is widely recognized as the nation's founding father. Lee was born in Singapore during British colonial rule to stand part of the Straits settlements. He gained an educational scholarship to Raffles College, and during the Japanese occupation, he worked in private enterprises and as an administration service officer for the propaganda office. After the war, Lee attended the London School of Economics but transferred to Fitzwilliam College, Cambridge, graduating with first class honours in law in 1947. He became the barrister of the Middle Temple in 1950 and campaigned for the UK to relinquish its colonial rule upon returning to Singapore. Mr. Lee co-founded the People's Action Party in 1954 and won his first seat in the Tanjong Pagar division in the 1955 election. Mr. Lee led his party to his first electoral victory in the 1959 elections and was appointed as the state's first prime minister. To obtain complete self-rule from Britain, Mr. Lee campaigned for a merger with the former British territories in a national referendum to form Malaysia in 1963. Racial strife and ideological differences led to Singapore's separation from the Federation of Malaysia to become a sovereign city-state in 1965. Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew oversaw Singapore's transformation into a developed country with a high income economy
Generation.
within a single. In the process, he forged a highly effective anti-corruption government and civil service. Mr. Lee eschewed populist policies in favor of long-term social and economic planning, championing meritocracy and multiracialism as governing principles, making English the lingua franca to integrate its immigrant society and to facilitate trade with the world, whilst mandating bilingualism in schools, preserve students' mother tongues and ethnic identity. Mr. Lee stepped down as Prime Minister in 1990 but remained in the cabinet under his successors, holding appointments of senior minister until 2004, then minister mentor until 2011. He died of pneumonia on 23rd March 2015, aged 91. In a week of national mourning, about 1.7 million Singapore residents and world leaders paid tribute to him at his lying in state at Parliament House and community tribute sites. The legacy of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew. As the Prime Minister from 1959 to 1990, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew presided over many of Singapore's advancements. He oversaw Singapore's transformation from an island nation with a high illiteracy rate and no natural resources into a developed country with a high income economy within a single generation, commonly termed from his autobiography as from third world to the first world. Singapore's gross national product GNP per capita rose from 1,240 in 1959 to 18,437 in 1990. The unemployment rate in Singapore dropped from 13.5% in 1959 to 1.7% in 1990. External trade increased from 7.3 billion in 1959 to 205 billion in 1990. In other areas, the life expectancy at birth for Singaporeans rose from 65 years in 1960 to 74 years in 1990. The population of Singapore increased from 1.6 million in 1959 to 3 million in 1990. The number of public flats in Singapore rose from 22,975 in 1959 to 667,575 in 1990. The Singaporean literacy rate increased from 52% in 1957 to 90% in 1990. Telephone lines per 100 Singaporeans increased from 3 in 1960 to 38 in 1990. Singapore's visitor arrival to Singapore rose from 100,000 in 1960 to 5.3 billion in 1990. Notably, these economic accomplishments were achieved in large part due to Mr. Lee's stewardship of public administration to relevant and targeted public policy. Mr. Lee introduced measures to jumpstart manufacturing of finished goods for export and sought to create a conducive business environment in the trading nation to attract foreign direct investment. Mr. Lee also forged a symbiotic and mutually dependent relationships between the People's Action Party with the National Trade Union Congress, whereby the governing political party receives certain input from the labor grassroots, while the National Trade Union Center is led by prominent party politicians who usually have ministerial portfolios within the government. The government's tight control over trade union activities and industrial relations ensured near total industrial peace that was assessed to be a prerequisite for rapid economic development. Mr. Lee was a staunch promoter of economic globalization and a vocal opponent of protectionism, a co-inventor of Asian values. During the 3 decades in which Mr. Lee held office, Singapore grew from a developing country to one of the most developed nations in Asia and the world. Lee said Singapore's only natural resources are its people and their strong work ethic. In addition, Mr. Lee was focused on social policies such as improving and mandating higher public standards for education, sanitation, and hygiene, while concurrently improving public health by expanding modern healthcare and greatly increasing the quality and quantity of high-rise affordable housing. Through the establishment of the Housing and Development Board and for working and middle class families. Mr. Lee's achievement in Singapore had a profound effect on the communist leadership in China, who made a major effort, especially under Deng Xiaoping, to emulate his policies of economic growth, entrepreneurship, and subtle suppression of dissent. Mr. Lee also had a major influence on thinking in Russia in recent years. Other world leaders also praised Mr. Lee. This is Distinguished Toastmaster Brahma Kumar. If you like this video, like it, share it, and subscribe to my video channel known as Motivating Thoughts. I shall return tomorrow with another tale to share with you. Have a good weekend ahead.